Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, tonight we're going to be continuing with our series of shirim based on the Torah of the Goyen and the Tzaddik, Rav Yitzchak Maya Morgenstern Shlita, Entering the Sea of Wisdom. And tonight will be much more of reading the Oisios of the Tzaddik inside. This was a short Shalashidus Maimer that the Rebbe gave 2 weeks ago in Pashas Kiseitze Tafshin Pei Beis. And now I can say that I've had the splus of hearing three Shalashidus drashas live now. And what I can tell you is that it's a mamid that every single person should try and have the experience to do, because Eino doime shmiya haTorah mipi haTzadik to the kriya of the Torah from the osios of the Tzaddik, but nevertheless, having a little bit more of a hasaga of what it looks like to see the Tzaddik give over Torah, a person comes to understand how little of a hasaga we have of the Torah that is being conveyed. There are many, many layers to the Torah. The layers that are explicit in front of us are the pu'ula, they are the result of the deep and intense self-sacrificing work of the Talmidim of the Tzaddik, who spend their time bringing down this Torah into a maimer form. But experiencing the Tzaddik give over Torah, mipiv HaKadosh, from the holy mouth, is mashu acher. It's an experience, and what I can say is the general hargasha is that when a person spends time in the Beis Medrash, when you pull up and you're by 18 Rechov Oale Yosef, it's mamish like entering into a place that is stuck 400, 500 years in the past. And then when the tzaddik comes out from his office, then it's already thousands of years in the past. And so Be'ezras Hashem will try and work with the oisios of the tzaddik to bring us a little bit into the mindset of how to prepare ourselves for Rosh Hashanah. Now, what the tzaddik is talking about in this drasha is really the inyan of Yisurin, the inyan of suffering. And as we've said before, if the words of the tzaddik are to mean anything, then they have to mean everything. Meaning to say that if they mean something for those who are higher up on the rungs of spiritual success, then they also have to mean something for those of us who are lower down on the lower rungs of spiritual struggle. Because the words of the tzaddik, as Rabbi Nachman writes, as Rabbi Nassan writes rather, in his Hakdama to the Likutei Moharan, are like a ladder that are reaching up above and descending down below, and they speak to each and every person in accordance with where they are. So if one person might find themselves in abject yisurin and abject suffering that is identifiable in their lives, then this Torah is going to be explicit in its value. But for those of us who thankfully do not encounter the day-to-day capital T traumas that would be considered to be experiencing yisurin mamish, we can also identify Yisurin within our own selves. As Chazal have already taught us, the most liberal understanding of what it means to be considered someone who is amongst those who suffer, all it means is that I put my hand in my pocket expecting $1 and I find 99 cents. Spoken in a different language, anytime that a Yid encounters a reality that is not aligned with their desire at that very moment, if a Yid were to recognize the power of their neshama, that would be enough of a suffering to be considered a Bal Yisurin. Because the fact that the neshama doesn't get what it wants in this world, that such a koyach, such a nuclear power of Nishmas Yisrael doesn't get exactly what it demands, exactly what it desires from this world, is enough to cause a person to question everything. And Memela, all we have to encounter is the slightest deviation away from our Ratzon Ha'amiti, as long as it's aligned with the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be considered a Bal Yisurin. So the Torah of the Rebbe, whether it applies to capital Yud Yisurin or a lowercase Yud Yisurin, is going to apply to all of us. The Rebbe says as follows, Avaha'inyan Hu, and the idea is as follows, Dihine Eisa Mea Baal Shem Tov. It's explained in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, and I didn't finish the introduction, so we'll pause here after those 3 words. What the Rebbe is saying is that the Yisurin, all of the suffering, all of the difficulty that a person encounters, not to negate the difficulty, not to negate the reality of the pain or the struggle, but to highlight that ultimately the Yisurin are not outside of the realm of spiritual experience, and that every element that a person goes through, especially the difficulties, especially the suffering, is there to enlarge the spiritual experience. And if a person is able to lean into the difficulty, if a person is able to be mismoded, not run away from the difficulty, but to lean into it, to experience it, to feel it, to sit with it, to be patient with it, suddenly the Yisurin stop being a mania, a prevention to the grasp of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they become the very site in which we can encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a newfound way. That the Yisurin themselves, rather than being a deviation away from the spiritual path, serve as edifying divestments, departure away from the typical path in order to allow us to sturdy ourselves on the path even more, to give us a grasp of how to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with even more intensity. That the Yisurim themselves are pathways, are openings, are moments of encounter where we can lean in and encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that we could not have encountered HaKadosh Baruch Hu when things were going easily. Zak the Rebbe, of ha'inyan hu dihine isa me Baal Shem Tov, and it's explained in the words of the Baal Shem Tov, shekol tsar v'yisurin sheyesh la adam, all difficulty and all pain that the individual experiences, hu nimshach me achar hapedamim oy benefesh oy beruach oy beneshama. They all emerge from deficiencies within ourselves. Our encounter with suffering, it's not that suffering is a result of our inequities, but rather the reality of suffering, the sense of suffering, is contingent upon some deficiency within the soul, some deficiency within our awareness. Because as the Baal Shem Tov tells us, a person cannot be punished until they take away their bitachon. What does that mean? Zok the Baal Shem Tov, as long as a person has bitachon, it's not considered suffering. Meaning to say that if a person's spiritual alignment, their mindset was clarified enough and my moichin were present, then the difficulties that I was experiencing would not fall into the category of difficulty because I would already be aware of the fact that it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in my life. So Zok the Baal Shem Tov, all of the Yisurin and all of the Sar, all of the experience of pain that we feel emerges from a chisaron, whether it be in the nefesh, in the bodily experience of ourselves, in the ruach, in the emotional experience of ourselves, o b'neshama, in the mindful experience of ourselves. And if the pagam is in the nefesh or the maisim, and if the pagam is in the ruach or the emotions, or if the pagam is in the neshama and the mind, it's going to be felt differently. But suffice it to say, when all is said and done, the experience of suffering, the experience of that pain, which causes us to question everything, is contingent and dependent upon a certain deficiency, not one that we are necessarily liable or responsible for, but a deficiency that we experience within our mindset creates the sensation or creates the awareness of something that appears to be a deviation away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is what Yisurin are. And the Rebbe says, the inyan is that all of the Yisurim, ki kol ha-Yisurim, him kelim sha'al yadam yochel livnos es beis ha-bechira u'lekabel das chadasha. That every experience of suffering, every experience of difficulty, every experience of brokenness, every experience of forlornness or loss or loneliness is an opportunity to build the Beis HaMikdash and to draw down a new capacity of understanding HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That every encounter that we have with difficulty in our lives is a moment where we can either fall apart as a result of it, or we can engage with das and awareness and build the Beis HaMikdash in this moment, which is drawing down the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and drawing down a new level of das. Now here, the Rebbe is going to go into a sugya that he's been discussing throughout Elul for the last previous years, which is the Os Aleph. As Rabbi Nachman of Breslov explains in Torah Vav from Likutei Moharan, which is the Igeris of Elul, which is a secret of tshuva, the entire tshuva process is surrounding around the letter Aleph. And as the Baal Shem Tov tells us, the letter Aleph is in truth everything, because the Aleph base is simply new iterations of Aleph. Aleph is one Aleph, base is two Alephs, Gimel is three Alephs, add infinitum towards the Tuf, which is 400 Alephs, and then it goes on and on. Everything is the Aleph. The Aleph is comprised of an upper Yud, a slanted Vav that serves as a connecting line, and a lower Yud. The upper Yud represents the Binyan Beis HaMikdash, the lower Yud represents Mechias HaMalek, and the Vav represents Miniyas HaMelech. Those are the three mitzvos that are dependent on entering into Eretz Yisrael. When a person enters into the Moichin of Eretz Yisrael, when a person comes to a place of Geula Pratis, so they are responsible for three things. The lower Yud is negating Amalek, getting rid of the difficulty. The upper Yud is building the Beis HaBechira, is drawing down that place where I can find the place for myself in relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Vav, Al-Kason, the slanted Vav, represents the Minyan HaMelech, which is the Hasaga of Melech HaMashiach Be'ezras Hashem. So the Rebbe says as follows. Why is it that all Yisurin are an opportunity to build the Beis HaMikdash? Ki etzem hayisurim heim bechinas yud tachton shebechinas milchamas hamalek. The experience of yisurim, the experience of difficulty, the experience of concealment, the experience of doubt, is dependent on the milchama with Amalek, the presence of Amalek in our lives. That is the encounter with the pain or the experience of pain that we feel. And that lower yud of the suffering that we encounter is simply a kli, a vessel that can bring us to the upper yud, which is the binyan beis habachira, which is building the beis hamikdash. As Rabbi Nachman writes in Torah Vav, "V'zehu doim laHashem v'tahil Eloi sheyapid lecha chalalim chalalim kedisa b'gemara hashkim va'erev b'beis medrash v'hu yipil oisam chalalim chalalim." This is what the Gemara says, that when a person encounters chalalim chalalim, when a person encounters deficiencies in their lives, emptiness, vacant spaces, chalalim, those areas in our lives that appear distorted and silent and empty and devoid of the light of God, the Eitzah is to be doim la Hashem v'techayla. We have to be silent in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to encounter it with a waiting, with a patience that is aware of the fact that this difficulty is simply there to bring about something greater. And the greater thing is the binyan beis hamikdash. Why? Ki kol hayisurim, all experience of suffering, all experience of difficulty, hu la'orer man kadesh yizk lemad chadash v'hasaga chadasha. Every experience of difficulty is what is referred to as a mayan nukvin, the feminine emerging waters which come about by way of the human being, the movement and the rustling of the spirit as it desires that which is absent from it, from below to above. That yearning desire, that secret of femininity that desires something to bring down more fullness. The Yisurin, the experience of difficulty, is simply the encounter with the yearning, rumbling desire that demands more. And in the very encounter with the Yisurin, we are drawing down more mad, mayan duchrin, the masculine waters, which represent the fullness that descends down again, which is the hasaga hachadasha. So every encounter that we have with difficulty is in truth an awakening from below to desire out of our inherent lack, out of our inherent deficiency, a desire for a fullness that can only descend from above. And this man, this mayan nukvin, this awakening that we need something to fill us from above, we need more hasaga v'kadosh baruch Hu. This is not the shame, but the embarrassment and the silence that the individual experiences in their encounter with difficulty. This is the aspect of Yisurin, which is the aspect of Amalek, which makes the world dark, and it causes us to forget the ultimate purpose. Every moment that we encounter where we're wondering, what in the world do you want from me here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? I don't remember what the tachlis is. I don't remember what I'm supposed to be doing. In the depths of forgetfulness, in the heart of darkness, what we're encountering is in truth a vessel, which is the opportunity to draw down more malchus, to bring down a new hasaga in Torah. And even when we're not aware of it. And this is the secret of when you go out to battle against your enemy, which is milchemes Amalek, which is the encounter with suffering. V'nasnu Hashem Elokecha b'yadcha, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives himself over into your hand. That the encounter with the difficulty is in truth the encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu offering himself. That everything is simply for the purpose of grasping Hashem Elokim. The Yisurin, the lower yud, is only there to awaken the upper yud. Zak the Rebbe, the Chasav HaMorinayim, and the Morinayim of Chernobyl says as follows in the same parsha of Kitei Tzela Milchama Aledecha, Ki Tivne Bayis Chadash Va'asika Ma'akal Gagecha. When you build a new house and you create a ma'aka, a border, a protective fence for your gate, Zak the Morinayim, Shehu HaYisurin Habayin al ha'adam u'ma'ikin lo. The lashon of ma'akeh, the lashon of a protective boundary, is the lashon of ma'ikin, which are bothersome issues, with our traumas, which are difficulties. So when a person builds a new house and a person encounters yisurin, which are ma'ikin lo, at that point, at that point, the person has to elevate their mind to where? To their gag, to their highest point in their lives. Shahagag hu b'chinas ha'machshavah shel ha'adam. The roof of the house is representative of the thoughts. So ki tzivne bayis chadash, that when you build a new house, when you want to have a new hasaga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you encounter the ma'akeh, the ikuv, the difficulty, at that point, what you need to do is you need to build a new roof. You need to elevate your mind to that place of the machshava. Because every purpose of difficulty is simply so that your gag, your mind, your thoughts can expand, and you can encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu in new ways. Because where I thought HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't, here I come to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. And through this, we throw down all that is difficult. And by becoming aware of this in our mind, by being mamtik the dinim, by being aware of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us out of the yisurin, out of the ma'akeh, we have the ability of throwing down all that is bad. Because the entire purpose of encountering difficulty is so that we could have new encounter with God. Because all Amalek wants to do is to block our minds and darken our minds from the grasp of Torah through the difficulties that we encounter and through the things that bother us. But if we know how to deal and contemplate the difficulty and encounter it through the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and know how to draw down a new hasag of Elikus, then we can be zeicha to the Yod HaElyon of the Aleph, to come to new understandings and new grasps, etc., etc. And we'll go weiter. We're going to skip a few paragraphs, which go into practicalities and dikdukim and oisios. The Rebbe says as follows on Daf Yud Gimel. V'hinei. Now, when it comes to understanding, when a person encounters a difficulty, the entire avodah is to seek out new ways of encountering HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How can I find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this thing that bothers me? This thing that now seems to be a prevention to my understanding of Hashem. This thing that seems to stand in stark opposition to my understanding of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. How do I transform this difficulty into an encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's only through seeking out the eitzos pshutos of the tzadikei emes, by spending time in the Beis Medrash and the Torah of the tzadikim. And this is the eternal light that is lit in the Beis Hamikdash, that illumination that comes from the tzadikim in every generation, the illumination that comes from the tzadikim amitim from the past generations that continue to reverberate into our generation. Because the light of the tzadikim amitim renews itself in every day and every moment. And there are new pathways, new permutations to uncover from the Torah in each and every moment. By understanding what the Torah wants from me in this moment. And that's how we uncover this perpetual eternal light that shines forth from the Torah. Every encounter with difficulty that we have and every breakthrough from that difficulty, every moment we think Hashem is not present and then we come to uncover that Hashem is present, that's a new eitzah from tzadikim. This is what it means to be machadish the Torah. And this is what it means to seek after and desire and be willing to die for the das of the tzadikei emes, to understand what Moshe Rabbeinu wanted from us, what Rashbi wants from us, what the Arizal wants from us, what the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh wants from us, what Rabbi Nachman wants from us, what the living tzaddikim want from us, what the Baal Tanya wants from us, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us, be'ikr, which is what the tzaddikim are coming to be megala. That we're coming to search out the Torah, the Atika Stima, or we're coming to search out the new future Torah that is yet to be revealed, which is the Torah that is born out of the difficulty, out of the encounter with concealment. And this Torah is being flowing forth and renewing itself at every moment. How do we encounter this new Torah? We encounter this new Torah by encountering our difficulties that we encounter day in and day out. And by encountering all of these difficulties and finding the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we uncover new Torah. Because every encounter that we have with difficulty is simply another opportunity to renew the Torah, to renew the Torah, as Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman describes at the end of the Sefer Bir Alikutim, Sha'achipus hazeh shel das emes hamischadshas b'chol eis b'chol rega k'fi ma she'over al kol adam. that to understand what the Torah is speaking to me in this particular moment, this is the secret of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Tzaddik Emes, and Mashiach Tzidkenu is being Megala new Eitzos in the Torah every moment. This is the true refuah, this is the true healing, to find Eitzos v'refuos in the Torah itself. Rabbeinu Shalom, how do I find you in this difficulty? How do I find you in this Yud Tachton? How do I take this difficult moment of concealment, find you in it, sit with it, and recognize that, you know what, Rabbeinu Shalom, before this difficulty, I assumed that a difficult like this would be the limit at which I could no longer find you. But now I find myself beyond that limit, encountering what I thought was impossible. I recognize that there's no possibility that you're not here, because if I'm here, you're here. And every moment we encounter new frontiers of difficulty, we also uncover new opportunities to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in places that could never have been revealed before. And by encountering the lower Yud, we enable ourselves to draw down the upper Yud, to build the Beis HaMikdash in our own minds, to build the Beis HaMikdash in our own days, and to transform all difficulty into opportunities to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Be'ezras Hashem.